Yeah, I have to pass on some information that I've gained from these planters, and it has to do with the shape of the planter. Yeah, when you're starting to make your cement planters or concrete fabric planters, think of it this way: you have the choice. You have the choice of what plastic mold you're going to use. So before you get into really complicated rectangular, larger planters, stick with round shapes. Get to know your cement, get to know the fabric, get to know how the cement behaves. Start out with something like this that's nice and round. They're a lot easier to make because they have that structural integrity built into them, into the round shape. This planter here only has 4 layers of cement fabric. Other planters that are rectangular or square, they need at least 6. So this idea of when you have something round like this, the pressure is completely equal everywhere. So you're getting this pressure pushing against the outside of the planter in the same amount of force. So what happens is in the freeze thaw cycle, round planters are much better than square or rectangular planters. It's similar to this egg concept where you push down on an egg and you can't do anything. But if you hit it on the side, it'll break. Like that roundness and the equal amount of pressure really gives it the strength, and you don't need as much fabric for that. So this planter has absolutely no damage. Um, Actually, even it's not getting wet on the outside, which is really interesting. That means that the 4 layers of fabric are thick enough to contain the water. So the water doesn't actually ooze out of the sides here when you water it, which is really important for freeze thaw cycle. When you have this measurement the same everywhere, it's a lot better for the strength of the planter in the freeze thaw setting as well, because the pressure is quite equal in a smaller planter like this, because you're also dealing with not having a really long rectangular side, which the forces can damage a lot easier. So when you're making these cut off pyramid planters or a square planter, if you add this extra edge and you put a piece of rebar in here, that will really strengthen this shape a lot by having this extra edge here. That will probably bring this up to the level of it being round. The pressure on it would be really dispersed by having this extra lip on here. Yeah, when you're making these long trough planters where you actually have this 4-to-1 measurement, you've got to really emphasize how much fabric you use. So this here has at least 6 sheets of cement fabric because of the shape. What happens is if this gets wet in the winter in the freeze thaw cycle and it starts to push in the middle here, it's going to do some damage to the planter. By having the 6 sheets, we've reinforced it quite a bit. You could put a rebar on the inside to strengthen this long measurement. But remember, when you pick a shape for your planter, you're going to predetermine what kind of strength you're going to need. The engineering really requires this to be super strong, especially in this direction. These sides could be a little bit weaker, but in the long direction, you need super strength with this. Like even when you're making paper thin planters like this, which is quite thin, you basically have the advantage of it, first of all, being round, and second of all, having it slope downwards. So this bottom spot requires a lot less strength than up here because this is so much bigger, this dimension. So be cautious about how you pick your shape for your planter. When you pick a shape that is vulnerable to freeze thaw or vulnerable to basically being split apart because of forces, then really emphasize the weaker sides with extra materials, and you'll get away with it a lot better building these planters that have weaker structures to them. Makes your learning process a lot easier. Round planters are definitely the way to go. And if you want to get into, you know, square planters, that's the next step up. And then the rectangular, longer planters that you have on your windowsill or your deck ledge are the next step up. but they require different type of engineering. So start off with something that's a lot easier, making planters that are round, and so get your shape to be a round shape, and you'll have it a lot easier. Your job will be a lot easier to make these planters. Yeah, there's something to say about this water leaking out of your planters. Even if you had like a cement planter, if you have moisture coming out on the outside, that's going to affect the longevity of your planter. This really bizarre fabric planter doesn't have any moisture spots. So what it means to me is that the 4 layers of fabric that are placed on here are creating a watertight barrier. So that's really important. If the water would come out here, it would spald this material here. It would make this fabric look old and ugly. So remember, there's this method of having enough protection so the water doesn't have the ability to travel through your planters. And this applies for cement planters as well. We have a little bit of moisture coming up from the bottom, but the planter itself is very dry. So that's going to really help with it not spalding or breaking up in the freeze thaw or just regular use when you water this. So if your planters are capable of containing, and it's been raining here for days, so there's lots of moisture around. So if your planters look dry on the outside, that means you've done a really good job of mixing the cements together and making them quite waterproof. One of the big factors as well, this one's completely dry as well, is the thickness of your walls. So the thicker you have your walls, the more waterproof they're going to be, obviously. But that brings another problem with them. These get incredibly heavy when you have 2.5-inch walls. So that's the bit of a drawback, is having these planters incredibly thick. If you're going thinner walls like this one here, the polypropylene fibers help a lot, keeping it nice and thin, nice and waterproofed. And again, having a higher cement ratio, going one cement to 3 sand gravel mix, that also gives you more of a waterproofing sealing characteristic.
If you want strong waterproof planters, the mixing effort is very important. Remember, mixing energy in equals waterproof cement or more waterproof cement and a stronger planter. Adding your mixing components correctly, keeping your mix very dry, and adding polypropylene fiber helps immensely with creating these really rich cement concrete planters that are super strong. This idea of adding more cement to the mix and making a really rich mix helps you immensely with creating these really strong planters.
It's actually a little bit too wet for me, so I'm going to add 1/2 a shovel of cement again. It's important to break up this polypropylene so it doesn't wrap around the blade and it doesn't have these great big chunks of polypropylene stuck together. We push it in a little bit, then we work it in so it doesn't wrap around the blade. Work in a bit more. And this polypropylene is like an accordion. It unfolds. That's why you want to put it at the end. You don't want to put this in the beginning because you destroy the accordion effect of this material. So it's always good to mix it the least amount of time, but you still want it distributed throughout your mix really well. Okay, that's it. It's actually a little bit too wet for me, so I'm going to add 1/2 a shovel of cement again. It's important to break up this polypropylene so it doesn't wrap around the blade and it doesn't have these great big chunks of polypropylene stuck together. We push it in a little bit, then we work it in so it doesn't wrap around the blade.